Skyrim, as peaceful and tranquil as it appears, is experiencing one of the most chaotic periods in its history. The Civil War. Literally and politically, Skyrim was divided. The Stormcloak Rebellion and Imperial troops brought the province to the brink of total collapse. And in this midst there is the Dragonborn, the true hero of Skyrim. Tired of an imperial tyranny disguised as an attempt at stability, and a cultural dictatorship disguised as a rebellion for freedom, he decides to act. It all begins in Whiterun and Riverwood. The Dragonborn appears on the streets of these cities, inciting people against these factions and raising his own banner. His voice was convincing, enveloping his allies with powers previously unknown, most unimaginable. He also called to the dragons, and they responded. Dragonborn becomes a symbol of freedom. Some breathe a sigh of relief when they see him parading his armies through the halls of their newly conquered cities. Others simply lay down their weapons and join his cause. With the Civil War over and the Thalmor being pursued by the Blades, the Dragonborn convenes a new moot with the Jarls and is elected the new High King of Skyrim. For the first time in decades, Skyrim finds stability and independence, and a new leader revered by the people. But not out of ambition, but out of a need to see the Dragonblood occupying the Ruby Throne again, the people of Skyrim and the rest of Tamriel began sending delegations to Skyrim, requesting that the Dragonborn meet with the Elder Council. The corrupt and dictatorial Elder Council itself, upon learning of this, assumes that the Dragonborn is trying to stage a coup against the Empire, and declares war on him. Immediately, Imperial troops invade southern Skyrim, but are repelled by the solid structure of the province, which effectively counterattacks. Now a new emperor sat on the Ruby Throne. The Dragonborn ruled directly from the White Gold Tower. Spontaneously, because they were culturally close to the Imperials and traditionally loyal to the Empire, the Britannian nobility saw the Dragonborn as a restorer of order and joined their empire peacefully. Hammerfell, independent and proud after single-handedly defeating the Thalmor, harbors a genuine resentment toward the Empire for having been abandoned following the White Gold Concordat. Knowing this, the Dragonborn submits a proposal for a military alliance against the Dominion, without the Red Guards relinquishing their autonomy. And they accept. After the eruption of Red Mountain and the Argonian invasion, Morrowind lies in ruins and withdrawn. The Dunmer live under an unstable regime, with no real outside influence. Imperial influence is virtually non-existent. In an attempt to establish ties, the Dragonborn negotiates with the Great Clans, granting them religious and cultural autonomy. In exchange, Morrowind would be an ally of the Empire. A deal done. Blackmarsh would never return to the Empire, not under threat, not through diplomacy. The Argonians, ruled by the Unsalil, have a xenophobic, anti-Mer, and anti-human ideology. Even the Dragonborn's good faith attempts to establish dialogue, he receives only silence from Argonia. Surprising a total of 0 people, the Aldmeri Dominion feels completely threatened and compelled to act against the new empire. This time commanded by a dragon descendant. Honoring the truce, Altmer ambassadors arrive at the White Gold Tower to deliberate on the Dragonborn's empire and demand new measures and clauses in the Concordat. Could this be the prelude to something beyond? The Empire has risen again. The Dragonborn sits upon the Ruby Throne. Skyrim, Cyrodiil, and High Rock are united. Hammerfell and Morrowind stand with him, but the world is not at peace. The emissaries of the Aldmeri Dominion arrived in the Imperial City bearing demands. What followed would ignite a war unlike any other. The Thalmor propose a new agreement that resembles the White Gold Concordat, but more severe. They demand lands in Cyrodiil, the elimination of dragons as weapons of war, tributes in reparation for the Aldmeri deaths during the conquest of Skyrim, and the complete banning of the worship of Talos again. The Dragonborn refused and the Thalmor declared war. From Valenwood and elsewhere, the Thalmor attacked the Empire by land, focusing on taking the Imperial City and establishing a front in Morrowind. By sea, they attacked the islands and coast of Hammerfell and engage in fierce naval battles. Even with a fierce attack, the Imperial Alliance refuses to give up. Winterhold mages join forces with Telvanni mages, the Blades act as high-ranking spies and assassins, and dragons roar through the skies. Facing the might of the Thalmor, the Dragonborn called upon the ancient voices of Sovngarde. He communed with the souls of fallen heroes, seeking guidance, or perhaps permission to go beyond mortal limits. Despite the Alliance's military efforts, the Thalmor regroup on Alinor and invoke powerful spells that create magical barriers around the Somerset Isles. Whether Navis by sea or dragons in the sky, nothing can break the Thalmor's magic. They were immune to any attack. In his meditation with the heroes of Sovngarde, the Dragonborn awakens a Thu'um never before heard of or known, even to the Greybeards. He was told that this Thu'um would only be given to him when the time was come. He stands alongside wizards from Morrowind, High Rock, and Winterhold, and shouts,
Ven. Ka Div.
The magical barrier breaks and the Imperial Alliance attacks the Aldmeri Isles with all its might. The power of the shout not only nullifies any targeted magic, but also nullifies any divine barriers. This allowed the Dragonborn to awaken immense power within himself. A white and gold aura surrounded his body, and his shouts were now much more powerful. Truth is coming to light. The Dragonborn finds Daedric artifacts in Aldmeri magic towers and discovers that the Thalmor seek not only domination but also the destruction of Mundus itself. They believe Nirn to be a failed creation. They seek its end. The Dragonborn now fights not just for Tamriel, but for existence itself. crystal log, the final confrontation begins. The Thalmor have created a massive attack weapon with a powerful volume of magic. To destroy the Dominion, the Dragonborn must destroy the core of the tower, risking a collapse of reality itself. The tower's power begins to collapse the veil between Mundus and Aetherius. At the end of the battle, the Aldmeri Dominion was defeated and the Dragonborn was missing. There was an air of victory and mourning at the same time. The Thalmor had finally been defeated, but the Dragonborn had vanished, leaving a vacuum on the Ruby Throne once again. For its performance in battles, Morrowind gained some territories to better recover from its internal crisis, and Hammerfell was granted the islands north of Somerset Isle. In the Imperial Throne Hall, the vast room is silent. The Ruby Throne stands empty, bathed in the pale light of dawn streaming through the tall, stained glass windows. The Imperial banners flutter in the wind of a new era, but no one sits upon the throne. Until the future Emperor is decided, an Imperial Council has been established, composed of members of the Imperial provinces and allies of the Empire. The council was called the Guardians of the Ruby Throne, and consisted of 9 seats, one for each representative of an allied province such as Morrowind and Hammerfell, or an imperial province such as Cyrodiil, Skyrim, and High Rock. In addition to Valenwood, Elsewhere, and Somerset Isle, which were rebuilt and incorporated into the Empire at the end of the war. There is also a 9th seat reserved for Black Marsh as a symbol of diplomatic invitation to the Argonians, although no envoy was sent. The initial reality appears to be one of peace and prosperity for all peoples, even for the regenerated Altmer, freed from the Thalmor tyranny that also oppressed them. The Dragonborn is seen as a new Talos, and his cult reverberates throughout the Empire and beyond. Tamriel seems confident about the future, though it knows its story is not yet over. After the unification of Cyrodiil, Skyrim, High Rock, Valenwood, Elsewhere, and Somerset, under the Dragonborn's banner, the Empire was reborn. Morrowind and Hammerfell, though not directly annexed, swore an alliance and hold a seat on the Empire's Elder Council as ambassadors. Black Marsh, however, maintained its isolation, until now. To the east of Tamriel, across the Ptolemaic Sea, Akavir is the mysterious continent known as the Land of the Dragon. Home to exotic and aggressive peoples such as the Kapotun and the Tsaishi, Akavir is marked by constant warfare and civilizations that defy the understanding of Tamrielians. Its past attempts to invade Tamriel have made its name synonymous with threat and mystery. With their own territories depleted by internal conflict and dwindling resources, the Akaviri warlords turned their eyes to Tamriel as a fertile and strategic territory for expansion, seeking not only conquest but also revenge for the failures of past invasions. The Akaviri cross the ocean and land on the southeastern coast of Tamriel, where Black Marsh lies. Within days, strongholds fall. Gideon, Stormhold, and Thorn are all conquered or abandoned. Even the Hist in deep silence seem to fear what comes from Akaviri. Faced with a potential threat, the Provisional Elder Council is convened. Representatives from Valenwood, Elsewhere, Morrowind, Hammerfell, High Rock, Skyrim, and Somerset sit under the aegis of the new empire. When the Akaviri ships march on Lilmoth, the Argonians abandon their pride and send an emissary to the council. A simple but historic request: help us, let us join forces. As the Empire prepares to respond to the invasion, rumors are once again circulating. The Dragonborn has fathered an heir born from his secret union with Serana, the vampire of the Volkihar bloodline. Serana had renounced the curse of the night, but still, for fear of persecution, the Dragonborn kept the birth a secret, even though his son was conceived after his mother's vampirism was cured. Raised far from the courts, the dragon's son remained a shadow in history. The Empire strikes back. Troops are sent from Cyrodiil to the east and Morrowind to the north. It was symbolic and honorable to see the Dunmer helping to liberate the Argonians, their arch-enemies of the past. The Akaviri, surprised by the unlikely union, face the weight of an awakened continent and are soundly defeated. And then the impossible happens. Black Marsh signs a treaty of alliance with the Dragonborn's empire. With peace sealed and the armies of Akavir defeated, a new dilemma arises. The forgotten heir, now grown, re-emerges from the shadows. His name? Kept secret. His lineage? Unquestionable. The Empire is reborn, but who will inherit it? Peace reigns for now, but on the horizon, old ghosts and new disputes loom. The history of Tamriel, as always, bows to the roar of a dragon. Or to its heir now. The Dragonborn has vanished, but his empire remains. With the end of the Thalmor and the victory over Akavir alongside Black Marsh, Tamriel experienced a brief peace. But the Ruby Throne lies empty, and the emergence of a bastard heir threatens to plunge the empire into its greatest crisis. 3 years after the end of the war against the Akavir, the Provisional Council lost power. Composed of representatives from all provinces, the council was unable to make unified decisions. Divergent interests between provinces began to undermine stability. Skyrim, Elsewhere, Valenwood, and Black Marsh remained loyal to the Dragonborn and the legacy his empire had left by helping liberate their lands. High Rock, Somerset Isle, and parts of Cyrodiil, however, began to question the legitimacy of the interim government. Things get worse when the name of the heir, Serana's son, is mentioned. Provinces like Skyrim, Elsewhere, Valenwood, and Black Marsh quickly recognized the Dragonborn's heir, revealed to be his son with Serana, born after she was cured of her vampirism. This was out of direct loyalty to the Dragonborn's legacy and trust in the bloodline that defeated the Aldmeri Dominion. Morrowind and Hammerfell abstained, but they had a hidden preference for the Dragonborn's bloodline, even if they didn't say it openly. High Rock, part of Cyrodiil and Somerset Isle, refused to recognize the young heir for different reasons. The Bretons of High Rock, masters of politics and intrigue, claimed a lack of formal legitimacy. The Dragonborn's crown was obtained through strength and conquest, not through hallowed lineage. Many imperial nobles of Cyrodiil saw the ascension of a bastard as an affront to the Ruby Throne and wished to re-establish a traditional dynasty, and the newly conquered Somerset Isle still held resentment towards the Empire and wished to take advantage of the power vacuum to free itself, denying any alliance with the new heir. The Provisional Elder Council fractured and parts of it dissolved. In this context, two factions emerged. The Order of the Pure Crown, formed by imperial nobles, Bretons, and elves who reject the heir and want to restore the old imperial model with a new, pure dynasty, and the Legacy Guardians, led by former allies of the Dragonborn and now defenders of the young heir. They include veterans of the war against the Thalmor, advisors from Skyrim, leaders of Black Marsh, and even members of Valenwood and Elsewhere. Serana reappears in solitude after years of voluntary exile in Morrowind. Years earlier, during the war against the Thalmor, she had been cured of her vampirism. To protect her newborn son, heir to a lineage that would be targeted by all enemy provinces, Serana hid in the depths of Velothis, under the protection of the old bloods of Morrowind. Before leaving, she entrusted her son to the Greybeards, the legendary monks of the Throat of the World, to be protected and trained away from the eyes of the world. His name was Orin. Now, with the threat to her son's legitimacy growing, Serana returns publicly to reaffirm the veracity of the lineage and swear fealty to the new empire, ready to protect the Dragonborn's legacy and her only heir. A public hearing is held in Bruma, a symbolic city on the border of Skyrim and Cyrodiil, where Serana and the Legacy Guardians attempt to negotiate the heir's recognition with the imperial nobility. During this, Orin the heir delivers a public speech in the town square, using a peaceful and conciliatory yet firm tone. His voice echoes like thunder, earning the trust of his allies and the wrath of his enemies. Negotiations end when emissaries from the Order of the Pure Crown attempt to assassinate Orin and Serana, who are saved by the Blades and help them escape to Skyhaven Temple, and their mother and son remain until the dust settles. This moment formally begins what has become known as the War of the Crowns, a conflict between provinces and factions, each with their own view of who should occupy the throne of Tamriel. The war dragged on for 2 years. One side was under the banner of the heir, the other under the coalition of the Pure Crown. In the end, the 20-year-old heir personally leads the Legacy Guardians' forces in a final battle focused on taking Daggerfall and destroying the headquarters of the Pure Crown Coalition. Orin didn't train with the Greybeards for nothing all these years. His combat skills were admirable, especially his use of Thu'um inherited from his father. Having already defeated almost the entire enemy army, an aura of fire descends upon Orin from the heavens, and both armies gaze upon it with fear or hope. Two flaming dragon wings are seen emerging from his back, and behind him, the flaming image of the Dragonborn appears, and with a dragon's voice asks that they have mercy on their enemies, and recognize Orin as the rightful heir to the throne. The enemy army, demoralized, surrenders. The spectral flaming image of the Dragonborn returns to the heavens, leaving Orin a new dragon amulet, similar to the one Akatosh gave to Alessia. Orin, now known as Yolviing, gathers his troops and marches to the Imperial City, where he is welcomed as a hero. Finally, under the new title of Emperor Orin Yolviing, the Dragonborn's legacy is restored. The heir assumes the Ruby Throne as High Emperor, unifying Tamriel once again under the banner of the Dragonborn's legacy. Peace in Tamriel would not be achieved simply by the presence of an emperor on his throne. On the contrary, it only opens the door to new conflicts on the horizon. But for now, the people could rest. After the revelation of his bloodline, young Orin Yolviig was crowned the rightful emperor of Tamriel, heir to the legendary Dragonborn. Uniting the power of the Dovahkiin bloodline with the prestige of the throne, Orin restored stability to a post-war era. With the help of the Imperial Provisional Council, now formalized as the new Elder Council of Tamriel, and firm alliances with Morrowind, Hammerfell, and Black Marsh, the young emperor ushered in an era of reconstruction, reorganization, and vigilance. The threat of Akavir had been contained. Peace seemed to finally reign. Under Orin Yolviig's reign, the reborn empire of the Dragonborn reached its peak. The scars of the war against the Aldmeri Dominion had healed. Tamriel was free, united, and strong as it had been since the days of the First Empire. But Orin knew that to be an emperor like his father, he would have to be a declared erudite and seek ever more power in the form of knowledge. That way he would understand, the hard way, that not all enemies are mortal like him, and that almost cost him his empire. When the Dragonborn disappeared during the final victory against the Aldmeri Dominion, his soul was not lost. He ascended, becoming something more, a being beyond flesh, beyond Nirn. His final Thu'um, a scream so powerful it warped reality itself, freed him from all divine and Daedric influences. Not even the Nine, nor the princes, could reach him. For a prince of knowledge like Hermaeus Mora, this was intolerable. The Dragonborn had escaped his web, but if he could no longer reach his father, he turned to his son. Emperor Oren spent hours absorbed in the knowledge of the library and studied with numerous magicians from all over the empire. His aptitude for magic was incredible. Always meditating on the path of the voice learned by the Greybeards, the young emperor proved himself to be more than just a great warrior, but also a great sage. But one night, while reading several books, he strangely came across one with a black cover and several strange images on its pages. Oren immediately thought it was a book of necromancy, but just as he was about to throw the book away, he heard a voice behind him.
Come closer, bask in my presence.
Hermaeus Mora whispered. He promised power, wisdom of the ages, mastery of history in the future. He offered Oren what no other man had ever had, absolute control of destiny. But Oren refused. It wasn't an offer, it was a trap. And the young emperor realized it. He wouldn't be a puppet like Mirak. The dangers on Solstheim seemed dormant, but Hermaeus Mora proved otherwise. From there, attacks came across Tamriel. Several portals opened, and from within each rift in reality emerged the Seekers, guardians of Apocrypha, creatures made of shadows, tentacles, and eternal eyes. Behind them, the Lurkers, gigantic deformities that smashed through walls. Towers of spinning books, rune obelisks, and organic claws emerged from the ground, corrupting the land. Due to its location near Solstheim, Morrowind suffers heavy attacks. Blackmarsh and Hammerfell decide to act when Morrowind falls. Several Dunmer are welcomed as refugees in Cyrodiil. From the rear, they are surprised by portals that appear in Hammerfell and Somerset Isle. Oren Yolvig realized. Only he could end this. And so, with the Greybeard's blessing, the Emperor marched to Morrowind, where the greatest portal in Apocrypha had opened. The final clash against the Daedric Prince Hermaeus Mora was won not by dragon cries, but by sheer mortal determination, sacrifice, and arcane strategy. Knowing that no mortal could destroy a Daedra in the traditional way, the Imperial Council gathered Tamriel's greatest arcanists to conjure an arcane anchor, a mystical prison sealed by 6 elven and draconic artifacts. Oren infiltrated the plane of Apocrypha with an elite group. There, they used the artifacts to seal Hermaeus Mora within his own realm, forcing him to retreat for centuries, perhaps eons. Mora was not destroyed, but his influence on Nirn was severed. The enemies that remained in Tamriel were gradually hunted down by the Empire. With the end of the war, Tamriel turned to Morrowind, which urgently needed to be re-established. Runes, books, and other magic were now strictly controlled by the Empire. Gradually, Morrowind was restructured, but the island of Solstheim was annexed to the Empire for safety. Militarism grew throughout the Empire, and those who used so-called forbidden magic were imprisoned or even executed. The Emperor Oren and the Elder Council approved a series of measures to control the magic used in the Empire. But worse than the Empire's dictatorial status, Morrowind now lay. Bitter and resentful of the Empire, deeming the Emperor weak and incapable of defending their lands, they grew even more enraged when they saw their magical activities minimized by mere decrees. They felt their Telvanni mages were only used as pawns when their magical abilities were convenient. Now these same mages are persecuted by the Imperial Guard. The Empire won in exchange for stability. Even as the years pass after the Apocrypha crisis, as it was known, Morrowind is a living scar. The Telvanni towers crumbled, the sanctuaries were violated, entire families disappeared. Imperial liberation came but late, and the memory of the occupation burns more than liberation itself. Now its leaders want more than retaliation. They want rebirth. Telvanni gather escaped masters, Redoran rebuild fortresses, the old rites return discreetly from the ashes. Tamriel breathes harshly. The shadow of the last war has not yet dispersed. Hermaeus Mora's name remains in the ruins, and the scars he left also impact the hearts of men. The victory over the Daedric legions was won in blood. Oren Yolvig built an empire hardened by necessity and guilt. Thus, the Alessian decree was born. Mages under surveillance, schools sealed, grimoires confiscated. The goal was simple: never again an archaic or arcane catastrophe. In contrast, the result was complex. Wounded cultures, suspended alliances, and a resentment growing at the edges of the map. Morrowind, Hammerfell, and Black Marsh feel the weight. They don't call for war, they call for respect, for reconstruction, for autonomy. But when a government uses fear as a tool, even patience turns to fire. The Alessian decree has a trail, and imperial law respects no boundaries when pursuing the guilty. And one incident can ignite everything. In Sentinel, an Imperial patrol sails through the harbor searching for a conjurer. 2 merchants die. In the swampy waters of Argonia, imperialist expeditions burn a village in search of a sorcerer. Resentment turns to question who will be the next target. Casualties increase every year, and what should protect the Empire causes them greater fears. The answer doesn't come in cannons, it comes in letters. In silent ports and discreet halls, emissaries exchange words the Emperor doesn't hear. Morrowind, seeking to protect its culture. Hammerfell, fearful of Imperial interference. Blackmarsh, weary of incursions. All agree on a strategy. Terms are signed. Trade routes that bypass Cyrodiil. Reciprocal extradition agreements. Exchange of military intelligence. A pact made in the shadows to protect what the decree threatened. It is called in whispers, the Pact of the Ghost Sea, a name given by those who remember the old sea currents that now serve diplomacy, not war. The Blades noticed and intercepted some of their movements, but when they reported this to the Emperor, little did they know that soon, they would have bigger concerns than a pact that excluded the Empire. While the fringes plot in silence, a new flame is born in the center. Once a silent movement, they now call themselves the Alessian Crusade. The decree is now a religious manifesto, and fervent priests declare the Purge sacred. The message is simple and brutal. Magic is heresy. Elven blood corrupts, and Morrowind must be completely annexed, and its magic extinguished forever. Wherever they pass, the flames are real. Brave and humble, they forget the throne and take up the staff of faith. Villagers, farmers, blacksmiths, and even some professional soldiers desert their positions and join the crusade. In Anvil, Kvatch, Coral, and Bravel, riots break out violently. The crusade also spreads to the regions of Skyrim and elsewhere, which embrace an ideology that symbolizes the purging of what they fear. Valenwood has certain northern locations that are heavily attacked by the Crusaders. The Imperial troops managed to temporarily stop the Crusaders, but this left them in a region between the Imperial army and Morrowind. Therefore, to escape the Imperial advance and retreat the troops in a desperate maneuver, Morrowind would be invaded by the Crusaders while they held the front on the other side. An invasion of Morrowind was inevitable. In the port of Necrom, a figure is seen with considerable astonishment. Yes, the prophecy was clear. He would come when Morrowind needed him. After years of tragedies, invasions, and humiliations, the Dunmer people see in that ship a legend that has become their spark of hope. Nerevarine, they shouted in joy. He who defeated Dagoth-Ur and spoke to the myths themselves now walks among the living. His return is not just skin and voice, it is a symbol. For Morrowind, he is the promise of rebirth. For Hammerfell and Argonia, a reason to listen. For Arin Yolvig, he is an unjust shadow, a leader who challenges his authority. Armed with great motivation and courage, the Dunmer attacked the Alessian Crusade, shouting the Nerevarine's name at the top of their lungs. They were happy to fight this battle in the name of their land. The Emperor Arin Yolvig and the Nerevarine meet on the battlefield after having won the last battle against the Crusaders together, but the atmosphere is not very friendly. They both looked at each other with suspicion and, simultaneously, admiration. The two leaders then departed for the Imperial City to deliberate on what would happen from now on regarding Morrowind, the Free Provinces, and the Alessian Decree. There was a tense joy among everyone. Throughout Tamriel, the Nerevarine's return was heard and greeted with great euphoria or distrust. No one truly knew what the Emperor would do about it. Would they start a new war for supremacy that would lead to Tamriel's collapse? Everything would be resolved in the white gold tower of the Imperial City, in a meeting between the Emperor, the Elder Council, and the Nerevarine with the Telvanni and Redoran leaders. Some emissaries from the other provinces were also sent, but despite the uncertainty, one thing was certain. The fate of the Empire rested on that great round table. Between walls and diplomats, the meeting between Emperor Arin Yolvig and the Nerevarine began tensely. Neither side knew what to make of the matter. Both began to exchange ideas, experiences, and knowledge, realizing that a war between the Empire and Morrowind would not be beneficial to them and could result in their destruction. From the Nerevarine came the proposal to completely revoke the Alessian decree, the return of the island of Solstheim to Morrowind, and the promise of magical collaboration with the Empire. In return, Emperor Oren would receive back the lands southeastern Skyrim, the lands of Nibene, the cities of Cheydinhal and Bravil in Cyrodiil, and would receive Morrowind's commercial and magical assistance in rebuilding the Magic Guild and strengthening the College of Winterhold in Skyrim. With this done, the pact was sealed. Emperor Oren and the Nerevarine were new allies, and magic, once viewed with fear, was now the symbol of this new alliance. Controlling magic would not require persecution or suppression, but guidance with wise minds. Suddenly, everything seemed quieter and slower. Only the Emperor and the Nerevarine moved freely, wondering what was happening. It wasn't long before a strange, wizard-like figure mysteriously appeared among them. His robes made it clear to Oren who he was. The Psijic Order, one of the most mysterious forces in all of Tamriel, had sent an emissary, and he stood before them, speaking things that sounded only slightly worrying. The old wizard, wrapped in time-faded robes, spoke of the foundations of Nirn's creation. His voice was deep, as if carrying centuries of ancient knowledge. He recounted knowledge as old as the world itself. In the beginning, the Aedra built the Adamantine Tower, also known as Adamantia, or Dureni Tower, on the island of Balfiera in High Rock. This was the first of the towers, the focal point of the convention that shaped Mundus. The Altmer replicated this power in the Crystal Tower, erected in the Somerset Isles as a monument to the elven spirit. It was sacred, the embodiment of crystallized law. But this majestic tower fell during the Oblivion Crisis, devastated by Mehrunes Dagon's invasion. After being rebuilt, the Dragonborn absorbed its power, ending the battle against the elves. In Cyrodiil stands the imposing white gold tower, the heart of the Empire, supported by the Amulet of Kings, a mirror of mortal reality. When this amulet was destroyed, its foundation became unstable, even with the amulet's replacement by the Dragonborn, carried by the Emperor. In the highlands of Skyrim, the highest peak itself, the throat of the world, rises like a living tower. Naturally formed, it is a vertebra from Nirn, where the breath of Akatosh still reverberates in the icy air. In Morrowind, Red Mountain pulsed with the heart of Lorkhan, the lifeblood of the Dunmer. When the Nerevarine freed the heart, the tower collapsed, bringing profound consequences. Valenwood houses the Green Tower, or Green Sap, a living structure, the forest itself taking the form of a tower. It is an organic pillar, rooted in the essence of the forest. The ruins of Yokuda guarded the Tower of Orichalc, but its sinking took the tower with it. And the Dwemer built the Tower of Brass, the Numidium, attempting to recreate the divinity, whose echoes still echo in Mundus. Each of these towers has a stone that anchored its strength, like the White Gold Tower, which had the Amulet of Akatosh as its stone. When the tower, or its stone, falls, reality trembles, even if it is replaced. Mundus may withstand some falls, but the lost continues to weaken the world's foundation. Hermaeus Mora's invasion was a desperate attempt by the Daedra to dominate Tamriel and restore balance to the towers with their forbidden knowledge. He failed, and this paved the way for the magical flow that helps sustain existence to be sealed off. Many disruptions to the world's balance have been witnessed thus far. In other words, the thread that holds reality together is more tenuous than ever. To stem the collapse, it would be necessary to hold what remains firm, be it an active tower or some mystical replacement. It would also be necessary to work to prevent outside forces from manipulating the void, such as the Daedra, or even ambitious mortals, or even establish a new anchor, create or reactivate a tower to rebalance Nirn. He leaves, and things around him return to normal. Evidently, there are new deliberations to be made with the Elder Council. Against the Emperor's wishes, this information leaks and spreads like a plague throughout the Empire, and the fear of a possible end of the world begins to haunt the society of men and elves. This opens the way for radical groups of Telvanni mages, Winterhold sorcerers, and mages from all over Tamriel to emerge as a homogeneous renegade group. Resentful of years of persecution, they advocate an end to control through fear and favor magical supremacy to overcome the world's imbalance. Without the brutality of the Nords, the political aristocracy of the Bretons, the diplomacy of the Imperials, and the mysticism of the Elves and Khajiit, the group organizes itself centered in Nibene, a symbolic location for the mastery of magic by the ancient Aelids. Led by Dorvan, a Dunmer archmage, the group was known as the Balancers, as they believed that the creation of a state completely guided by magic could artificially create a new tower of support. The few remaining mages considered the Balancers' actions barbaric, as the safest course of action was to reinforce the power of the other towers, such as the Crystal Tower of Alinor, rather than create an artificial one. None of it seemed to make sense. The Balancers crafted their discourse using fear of the end of all things, claiming they were the true source of world-saving power, with Dorvan crowned the Emperor of Nibene in a symbolic ceremony. It soon became clear that the intentions of those who claimed to be saviors were simply to retain power. Orin and the Nerevarine feared direct confrontation with them, as this would exacerbate the magical imbalance. Tensions only rose. Everything turned hostile when an emissary from the Empire was attacked and killed while heading toward the Balancer's territory. Who killed the emissary was uncertain, but everything led the Emperor to believe that radical mages were the perpetrators of the attack. Thus, war is declared. Archmage Dorvan fell in battle. But in his chambers, hidden within the Ayleid ruins, his entire plan finally came to light. It was no surprise that Dorvan desired the Dunmer mages at his side. With them came the ancient knowledge the Dwemer left in the ruins of Morrowind. Secrets of the Numidium itself. Dorvan had been born in Morrowind during the Argonian invasion, had grown up in the shadow of the eruption of Red Mountain on Vanderfell, and had witnessed the Oblivion Crisis with his own eyes. But the Alessian decree had been the final straw in his heart, already consumed by hatred. Steeped in the mysteries of the Dwemer, he planned to rebuild the Numidium, transform it into a new tower, and make his own heart the stone that would anchor its power. In a single gesture, he believed he could restore balance to Nirn and wield the most powerful weapon in history. His dominion would be absolute, his power supreme and uncontested. He would reign over the entire world, but he was stopped. Before Emperor Orin and the Nerevarine, in the vast hall of the ancient ruins, stood a colossal and incomplete magical construct, a prototype echoing what would one day become the Numidium. Even in its unfinished form, its presence radiated instability and dread. Both knew at once that nothing good could ever come from it. Instantly, the sky shifted. Night descended only for dawn to break moments later, as if time itself had lost its rhythm. The skies churned with unstable weather, a chaotic omen, a harbinger of something far more terrible yet to come. As they hurried back with their armies to the Imperial City, they were surprised by the arrival of Paarthurnax at the White Gold Tower. He looked at them with weary but steady eyes, and then spoke. He said the world trembled under the weight of foolish choices, and that the attempted creation of Numidium had been the straw that broke the camel's back, that Mundus had always lived in a fragile balance, and that the blind pursuit of power was now tearing at the very threads that hold reality together. Paarthurnax declared that everything known will be put to the test. He further stated that men and Mare sought to control forces greater than themselves, and that this imbalance would bring consequences that no army, empire, or god could contain. But maybe there is still one last path left to walk. After the catastrophic events of Numidium and the Tower Crisis, Nirn's instability reached an unprecedented level. The fragmentation of the towers, the uncontrolled magical energy, and the attempt to create a new tower had left Tamriel vulnerable like never before. Paarthurnax, the wise voice of ages past, has appeared before Emperor Orin Yolviig and the Nerevarine, and presents what could be a glimmer of hope not only for the Empire, but for all life on Nirn. He talks about the Kalpa, which would be a great era of time, a cosmic cycle of creation and destruction that encompasses the birth, life, and death of a world, and ends in a period of chaos known as the Dawn Age, which precedes the creation of the next Kalpa. The defeat of Alduin by Emperor Orin's father was enough to permanently or momentarily prevent the end of all things. But time takes its toll. What they could be experiencing at that moment would be precisely the end of a Kalpa. But there was still one thing in question. As soon as the Elder Scrolls were created, one of them, the Elder Scroll of Destiny, was fragmented into two halves by mysterious forces and wills, unknown even to Paarthurnax. This division was not arbitrary. It had a hidden and sacred purpose. Only when united could these two parts fulfill their true function, to correct the false collapse of a great Kalpa. This could have been the big moment for the Elder Scroll of Destiny to be used, but a nagging question arose: where could its parts be? One of them was still in Tamriel, though by coincidence or fate, it had been lost during ancient Akaviri invasions. Rumors swirled that half might have been taken to the dark eastern continent, shrouded in mystery and unknown dangers. The other half remained in Yokuda, but there was no guarantee that it still existed. Perhaps it had been lost when much of the continent sank into the waters of oblivion. Even in the face of uncertainty, there was no time to waste. Action needed to be immediate, and a contingency plan was drawn up, especially since Daedrus lurked in the darkness. Emperor Orin Yolvig, backed by the Empire's former alliance with Hammerfell, would set out for Yokuda, conducting a reconnaissance operation. His mission was clear: to establish contact with the few, enigmatic peoples who might still live there, having isolated themselves from the rest of the world after the fall of their continent. There, perhaps, lay the first half of the Elder Scroll of Destiny. Meanwhile, the Nerevarine, a veteran of ages past and knowledgeable in the ways of Akavir, would undertake the mission of crossing the Eastern Sea. His goal was to deliberate a possible alliance with the enigmatic Akaviri races, a people feared and respected for their martial prowess and ancient mysticism. There, according to long-held suspicions, might lie the other half of the Elder Scroll. In Tamriel, Paarthurnax and the Elder Council would remain vigilant, ready to sustain the Empire in the face of any instability. And indeed, it would not be long before the greatest crisis of all erupted, a threat capable of consuming Nirn completely. The Nerevarine departed Morrowind, while Emperor Orin Yolvig set sail from Hammerfell. Neither of them truly knew what they would find in such distant lands. Akavir and Yokuda were more myth than reality. Arriving in Akavir, the Nerevarine found a continent torn apart by eternal chaos. The Kamal, snow demons, lay frozen during the winter, but when the summer heat arrived, they awoke in fury and marched against the neighboring peoples, especially the Tang Mo. In the past, they had even crossed the sea, bringing war to Tamriel itself. The Tang Mo, on the other hand, were a monkey people with a generous and innocent spirit. But this gentleness hid an indomitable ferocity. Centuries of attempted enslavement by the other races of Akavir had forged warriors capable of rising into great armies whenever their freedom was threatened. The Kapo Tun, the legendary dragon tigers, dreamed of becoming the true dragons of Akavir. Proud and imposing, they maintained an ancient rivalry with the Seishi, the serpent men. In that moment of crisis, they had joined forces with the Tangmo against the Kamal, a fragile but necessary balance for their resistance. The Tsayeshi, sinister and unfathomable, were the terror of the continent. Called the Serpent People, they ruled through cunning, swords, and an insatiable hunger for power. They were hostile to everything and everyone, and legend held that they were responsible for the extinction of mankind in Akavir, either devouring them or condemning them to eternal servitude. Surrounded by ancient and implacable forces, the Nerevarine found himself vulnerable, for in Akavir, even the air seemed to conspire against outsiders. For the alliance to be possible, he would need to choose his words carefully, or be devoured by the hostility of this dark continent. The Nerevarine heads toward the domains of the Kapo Tun, now ruled by the distant heir of Toshraka, the legendary tiger who once dreamed of becoming a dragon. The reception, marked by distrust and caution, does not surprise the hero of Morrowind. He knew that in Akavir, trust was not given, but earned. Before the Council of Dragon Tigers, the Nerevarine raises his voice and, in a speech imbued with the power of his own legend, summons not only the Kapo Tun, but all the peoples of Akavir to heed the call of Tamriel. At first, his plea seemed too bold to be taken seriously, but memories of the shattered sky, as the Akaviri called the phenomenon of sudden night followed by day, echoed like an unmistakable omen. They knew the fabric of reality had been wounded, and the Nerevarine spoke with the authority of one who had spanned the ages. But not everyone was willing to listen. The Kamal, demonic ice lords, and the Saeski, immortal serpents who dream of dominating the entire Earth, were driven into a war frenzy by this cosmic event. The disruption of the celestial order had inflamed them with fear and ambition, leading them to brutal attacks against Tangmo and Kapo Tun. Thus, the Nerevarine swore a solemn oath. He would aid the Kapo Tun and Tangmo in resisting the onslaught of the aggressive races, and in return, He demanded the unbreakable promise that they would march unitedly to the side of Tamriel when the time came. The pact was sealed in blood and fire, and the battle for Akavir's survival began to unfold across the snowy fields and eastern jungles. Fulfilling their oath, the Kapotun and the Tang Mo agree to aid Tamriel under the banner of the Nerevarine. Now, with the Sayeshi domains subjugated, the Nerevarine is guided by visions to an ancient temple long buried beneath the ruins of Akavir. Its walls, despite the passage of time, still bear enigmatic symbols reminiscent of the iconography of the Blades of Tamriel, as if a secret link has united the two continents since forgotten ages. Entering the main chamber, shrouded in broken columns and inscriptions in a dead language, an invisible force seemed to weigh heavily on the air, a silence that was not empty, but charged with power. In the center rested a black stone altar, cracked by time, where a golden glow emerged between the crevices. There, the Nerevarine found what no mortal dared dream of, a shattered fragment of an Elder Scroll still pulsing as if alive, emanating echoes of forbidden knowledge. as his hand touched the artifact. Visions of untold futures and wars yet to be fought flooded his mind, nearly tearing at his sanity. And yet, he remained steadfast. With the fragment in hand and the certainty that his journey was not over, the Nerevarine gathered his Akaviri warriors, rose as bearer of an ancient truth, and marched back to Tamriel, not only with an allied army, but with the weight of a destiny that echoed through eternity itself. Across Tamriel, disturbing signs began to spread across the heavens and lands. Mages were plagued by prophetic visions and feverish dreams they could not decipher. Magical rifts appeared like burning scars in the fabric of reality, opening passages to unknown dimensions and closing as quickly as they appeared. At first glance, they seemed mere arcane distortions, but the wisest feared they were omens of something far greater, something beyond mortal comprehension. In Yokuda, or what was left of it, Emperor Oren Yolvig crossed that desert forgotten by the world, camping night after night with his entourage. Days of marching amidst absolute silence, finding nothing but ruins eroded by time and lands scorched by the sea. No trace of civilization, no flame of life. Yokuda was no longer a continent, it was a colossal tomb, a scar opened in the heart of Nirn. No temples, no houses, no fortresses, only the silence of a land swallowed by water and time. Of the Yokudan's former glory, nothing remained but drowned ruins and forgotten ashes. The few who escaped, torn apart by tragedy, crossed the sea and built in Tamriel what is now Hammerfell. For Emperor Oren, this was almost a suicide mission, and an unnecessary one. With few supplies, the only way was to head for the ships to return home. Just as even the most loyal soldiers were accepting failure, the wind shifted. A low, almost lamenting song echoed from the mountains. The sound of sea bells, of chains clanging against invisible hulls. And then they appeared. A forgotten people, walking the sands like shadows of the past and hidden in the sea and mountains, the last Ansei. They were not kings nor generals, but survivors, spiritual warriors who chose not to follow their brethren to Tamriel. They became seafaring nomads, eternal navigators, living among broken islands, shattered mountains, and ruined coasts. Their bodies bore the scars of centuries, and their eyes carried the pale glow of the Shehai, the spiritual sword. Their leader stood before the Emperor, an elder marked with body marks that recounted Yokuda's own fall. He knew what Oren sought and wanted to help them. Carrying an ancient, partially rolled-up scroll, its luster seemingly unfading. He explained in a firm, solemn voice that this object was not merely an artifact, but what they called the Keeper of Knowledge, the lost half of the Elder Scroll of Destiny. He revealed that the scroll could not be read by just anyone. Only those truly prepared could unlock its secrets without suffering consequences. The power of time, destiny, and the very essence of Nirn rested within. The leader warned that any attempt to read the scroll without preparation would cause visions of fragmented dimensions, temporal distortions, and spiritual exhaustion. However, with the right wisdom, it could guide the world back from the brink of collapse and halt the catastrophe that threatened the Kalpa. To deliver the scroll, the Ansei demanded that the Emperor promise to protect the seas and the surviving peoples of Yokuda, preventing future incursions from Akavir. Thus, Oren Yolvig received the scroll, understanding that his duty was to preserve it and transport it back to the heart of the Empire. There, he would meet the Nerevarine. Though he remained uncertain about the success of his allies' mission to Akavir, each step carried the tension of a destiny that could decide the future of Nirn. Thus, the essential pieces were already in place on the chessboard of Nirn's destiny, and now its world depended on the union of those capable of wielding the power of the Elder Scroll of Destiny wisely. Across Tamriel, suspicions soon turned to terrifying certainty. Oblivion portals, like those that had terrorized the world during the Oblivion Crisis, were once again appearing amidst the devastated lands. Mehrunes Dagon sought to exploit every flaw and instability left by the towers, determined to inflict a final blow of chaos. His purpose was clear and absolute: to wreak utter destruction upon Nirn, extinguishing all that dared remain. Meanwhile, the dark currents of Cold Harbor emerged from rifts scattered throughout Nirn. Molag Bal watched with interest as the world weakened, ready to exploit any breach. Both Daedra sought revenge for past defeats, but they were not allies. Quite the opposite. While Mehrunes Dagon yearned for utter destruction, Molag Bal desired subjugation and domination. Tamriel's scattered forces might perhaps try to exploit the tension among the Daedra themselves, but this strategy would not spare them the horror of all-out war. As war consumed Tamriel, Emperor Orin Yolvig landed in High Rock, instilling courage and renewing the spirit of his armies in the face of the Daedra threat. Meanwhile, in the distant eastern lands, the Nerevarine emerged with the mighty allied army of Akavir, bringing with them the strength and discipline of peoples few mortals had dared to encounter for centuries. At first it seemed simple. Unite the pieces of the Elder Scroll of Destiny, read it, and restore balance. But the reality was quite different. Geographically, the heroes found themselves on opposite ends of the continent, separated by a vast, burning land teeming with enemies determined to thwart their mission. Each step forward would require colossal battles, strategic maneuvers, and courage beyond mortal limits. Before any hope of redemption could be realized, the Dark Armies would need to be defeated, or Tamriel would fall forever. The allies finally meet, and for a brief moment, a sigh of relief sweeps across the battlefield. With steady hands, they piece together the Elder Scroll of Destiny and read it. But for a moment, nothing happens. Despair threatens to overwhelm them. Doubt hangs heavy over their heads, and it seems all their efforts have been in vain. Then, slowly, the air around them grows lighter, charged with an energy that transcends the mortal world. A golden aura envelops the Nerevarine and Orin Yolviig. Above them appears Akatosh, the god of time himself, summoned through the power of the Elder Scroll. With a majestic gesture, he banishes the Daedras, restores the shattered towers, and restores balance to Nirn. But the price is inescapable. Orin remembers the words of the Yonsei leader and, with determination, accepts his fate. He allows himself to be taken by Akatosh, alongside the Nerevarine, joining the eternal flow of time. Balance is finally restored, but the heroes who brought it about will now remain one with Akatosh, just as the Dragonborn before them, becoming part of his very essence. Emperor Orin Yolvig and the Nerevarine departed, now blessed with Akatosh's eternal blessing. Tamriel had lost its leaders, but the world no longer needed them as it once did. The Nerevarine had cemented the alliance with Akavir, ensuring a lasting peace between the peoples of Tamriel and the distant continent. The Emperor had revealed Yokuda to the world once again, and its people were welcomed into Hammerfell, reinstating ancient glories and forgotten cultures. Nirn breathed in harmony, united as one people. And though their leaders were gone, the people's hearts were not filled with sadness. On the contrary, the memory of Orin and the Nerevarine radiated strength, courage, and hope. Every citizen felt within themselves the legacy of heroism and sacrifice, and the spirit of Tamriel blossomed with joy, confidence, and optimism. Everyone was a hero now. For the first time in ages, the world seemed truly whole. Akatosh guide you, my friend.